Wonderful. Well, thank you all for joining us. My name is Sarah Curran. I am the Director of Programs and Partnerships here at WPLN. We are a group that educates, organizes, and inspires women to run for office all over the United States and encourages them to get involved with local government through appointments and commissions and boards and that kind of stuff. So today we have a very fun conversation with two wonderful women, Lindsay Feiffield and Zuri Davis. I'm going to just start by talking about how wonderful they are. So Zuri Davis is an assistant editor at Reason Magazine. After graduating from Florida Atlantic University at the age of 18 guys, Davis moved to Washington, D.C. and pursued political messaging. She now reports on abuses in the criminal justice system, police brutality, wrongful convictions, and death row cases. She currently resides in Nashville, Tennessee. And from Fairfax, Virginia, we have Lindsay Feiffield, who is the social media manager for the Heritage Foundation, co-host of Lady Brains podcast, and senior contributor for America's Future Foundation. So ladies, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Sarah. It's so great to be here.
Fun fact, I have worked with both Lindsay and Zuri many moons ago, different organizations, but it's so fun to see how our careers have progressed over the last 5, 6, 7 years. It's been a while. So we're talking about cancel culture. And so I have to start off by asking, have either of you been canceled ever?
I guess no. I was thinking about that when you asked. I was like, it's a pretty straightforward question. It's a yes or no question. Why can't I answer it? And I think the reason I'm tempted to say yes is because I have had mobs of people coming after me. The only difference is I just ignored them and I was able to block them because I'm not really important enough to cancel because I've never run for office or put myself out there in a way that I think a lot of the women we're going to be talking to and about today are doing. But I've seen it happen to other people. Mm-hmm. So I guess that's the short answer.
Yeah, I guess you could say there's a difference between call out
yes.
culture and cancel culture. But Zuri, what about you?
So similar to Lindsay, the answer is no. And I just want to apologize really quick. My dog is with me and he thought now is a great time to start redecorating. So if you hear some bumps, that's him.
Girl, I'm in the kitchen. So like things are not happening today the way that I thought they were going to either. So
okay, perfect. But yeah, so I've never been canceled before. It's kind of it's a weird space because I'm also a journalist. So people have definitely called me lots of names. And now I have like a small little hate mail fan club. So I could expect to see some of the same people jumping on my articles to say, actually, like, you're dumb. And these are all like the things that I hate about you. But other than that, I've never actually been canceled to where I needed to lock down my Twitter, hop off the internet forever. So
yeah, I guess we should probably start by pulling back and talking about what canceling really means. And not all attempted cancellations work or are created equal. Mm-hmm. So let's just start there. Maybe we should define this for anyone who's watching who's been under a rock, because this has been an ongoing phenomenon for the last, I'd say, at least 3 years. Online. So how would you guys even define cancel culture?
Zuri, what do you think? Do you want to go first? I'll let you get
that. So it's really difficult because I think it means different things depending on what your actual politics are. And then also if you're a normal person who has activities outside of the internet. So for a lot of the negative cancel culture, and I'll explain the difference in a minute. That's very much that someone jumps on something. Maybe that was, it's kind of blown out of proportion. So it's still not great, but perhaps people are hyping it up too much to say, actually, like, you're a hateful person and we're going to make sure that you can never, ever work again. That's what tends to be people's experience with it. But then there's also perhaps something that I think is a little bit more legitimate, where people call for accountability. So that's when a lot of times physical things happen. So like harassment, for example, like well-documented harassment as well. A lot of times people will say, well, I don't actually want to support you anymore because you've done all these things and you're not actually sorry for them. And a lot of times that usually it tends to be internet celebrities. Their supporters tend to say, oh, that's cancel culture. But it's like, well, that person is actually a bad person. So it's okay to want to support them with your dollars anymore.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of the difference between celebrities, politics. I mean, R. Kelly deserved to get canceled, but he didn't just get canceled. He's in prison. So like he was held accountable for a crime, which is very different than, you know, someone rising to prominence and then people going through their Twitter feed, or your stepmom goes to Trader Joe's and acts like an idiot and gets filmed and gets put on the internet, and then everyone in your family has to like hide from hordes of people in the media for weeks. Like there's so many different types of cancellation. A lot of it that I think is bad for me personally is when people dig through archives in the past and go way back into people's future, because obviously we need to have space in our society for redemption and for forgiveness and growth and being able to say, I did that when I was 17. The difference I would say for in politics, though, is a lot of times we've created a space where we can't apologize. There's no mechanism where if you apologize to the mob, it actually makes it so much worse, because then you're caving to the mob per se. Sometimes there are things that you need to apologize for, and things that you should apologize for. Doing so without apologizing to the mob, because the mob is not who you are accountable to. You're accountable to the people in your community and your constituents if you happen to be like a member of Congress. But I don't think that there's a reason why you should ever say like, I'm really sorry, internet, because those people don't care about you. As many enemies as you probably have a much bigger like fan club and group of supporters that will know you're a good person and can kind of help you weather that.
Yeah, I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, that cancel culture really was born out of the idea that people were trying to take justice into their own hands where justice wasn't being served. So, for example, for like things like Me Too, where illegal accusations are being made, or R. Kelly was a great example, where people have been physically hurt, emotionally hurt, in ways that are illegal by law, and where people thought things weren't being done enough. I think that's where cancel culture kind of percolated and started popping up, boycotting, buying products, and that kind of stuff. Where I've seen it kind of go sideways is when people start to try to cancel people based on unpopular opinions, kind of like thought police. But it gets really gray, especially when we start to try to define what is, what kind of First Amendment rights people are allowed to say versus when it actually is harmful. It gets, you guys are both very prominent thought leaders, especially on like the Twitter sphere. So I'm sure you could school us all on things that you see that are good cancellations versus just like what is happening. Everything is coming in sideways cancellations. But overall, how do you think cancel culture really speaks to what's going on culturally right now in American politics versus Hollywood?
They're two different. They're so different. Sorry, I didn't want to speak first, but you see people like when people rise to prominence or they become trending for whatever reason, and it may not even be that it was like a choice that they made. The example that just came to my mind is, do you guys remember the London Bridge terror attack and the three guys that were super brave and the internet just erupted and, wanted to know more about these three heroes that stopped this terrorist attack, and one of them did it with like a narwhal tusk, and it was so cool. Then people looked into who this guy was and found out that he had a criminal history, and they started posting all about it and harassing his victims. And I mean, that's an example of, the internet can be a dark and terrible place, and things like that are going to happen. That's like the darker side of it. In politics, like you were saying, sometimes it's an empowering thing and it's a good thing. Like Katie Porter's victims never would have been given any light or justice if they hadn't been able to use the internet as their mechanism or their vehicle. And so many other people who, but then I think the difference between the modern era of this has been going on for centuries, this is not really new, is now the accountability structure has shifted, that you have gossip and you have unsubstantiated rumors, and you can never get rid of that. That's going to be out there forever. So you can literally, you see people doing this intentionally, just lying about people, and then that lie is out there forever. Jim Jordan has to fight smears about, I think most people know what I'm referring to, that are just completely ridiculous. And he doesn't waste any time, fighting back against them, but you see it in all the replies to his tweets. It could be a tweet about anything, and someone's going to bring up, that news story or that gossip. And so I think that we do need, as an internet culture, I would hope that would be something that we could stop doing, or something that we could try to correct. But so many times when we correct things, we kind of pendulum swings too far back. So now the people who are canceling oftentimes end up being canceled themselves. I think you saw that with Yashar Ali when he came to the defense of Chrissy Teigen recently about the Allison Roman thing. He actually got called out and had some cancel culture back on him, because people were calling out some of his bad behavior and Chrissy Teigen's bad behavior. So there's a lot of stone throwing on the internet, and I think we all just need to have more grace and not really engage and get down in that mud, because the more we just say I'm not going to comment on this, or this is none of my business, which is my favorite thing to be told as a kid, that's, I think, the right direction to go.
Yeah. Zuri, let me ask you this. Lindsay brought up that this could hurt your reputation. Do you really think there's a disproportionate share of reputational damage that happens for somebody who is well known, we'll say a prominent politician, versus someone who is running for office for the first time, or just a normal person that has not sought public fame? And does the bounce back or the repercussions of that personal reputational damage, differ?
So yes and no. It's very complicated. For the types of people who get canceled and then remain canceled versus the ones who get canceled, but then kind of come back to the public sphere, it's always kind of random. And before, I feel like we could usually say there's gender is a factor, or level of publicity is a factor, but now it's seemingly very random. So that's why I think that, and I don't want to sound like I'm victim blaming at all, please don't take it that way, but I think that if you find yourself in that situation, having a dialogue with those people, of course, Lindsay is very correct. You do not need to respond to every single person on the internet. However, if you know in your heart that you were a good person, and the internet is harping on a lie or something that's quite frankly very dumb, or something that you've already apologized for, if you know you can stand on your own reputation, just tell people. So I will say personally, as a libertarian, in any given month, I get a lot of progressive followers for tweets that I'll write about criminal justice. And I'll get a lot of conservative followers for tweets that I write about small government. And a lot of times, after a couple of weeks of them following me and not really realizing that I'm a libertarian, they do get upset at me for something else that I've said. So if it's a follower that I've kind of grown to care about, I'll say, hey, we may disagree on this issue and it's fine, but you know me and you know that I'm coming from a place that I'm being a genuine person, and it's because I care about people. And I feel like that is definitely received better than some of the people who stay canceled for a long time. They kind of respond like jerks, which I will say it's a very emotional thing to happen. So it's not it's not an unnatural response to want to do that, but to have some grace in the way that you respond to people, tell them, hey, you know me, and yes, this sucks right now and we don't see eye to eye, but we can talk through, if you actually care about me, we can talk through this. And if it's kind of a bad faith argument, just ignore them.
Oh,
That's a great point, because kindness, I was writing this down and I was like, the best insurance to keep you from being canceled. And it's not a foolproof thing, but just like you were saying, just being a kind person and being an understanding person and not being a hypocrite. If you're out there engaging in cancel culture, don't be shocked when it comes back on you. But if you're engaging in good faith with others, I mean, if the daughter from the Westboro Baptist Church can be converted to being a good person and renouncing the Westboro Baptist Church because of someone on Twitter taking the time to actually be nice to her, I think that story sticks out to me as just being so profound, because you can make a difference by just engaging with people in a kind way. And you can also avoid a lot of issues if you don't have the reaction that you immediately want to have. Like, I think waiting before you tweet helps a lot too. Sometimes you just want to fire off a response of like, you don't know who I am, you don't know where I work. People just make assumptions about you, which can be really frustrating. And you want to defend yourself and say like, you don't even realize how bad you sound right now. If you knew that I'm, this person or that person, or I believe this or that, but they don't deserve your time at all. And also, if you just wait and respond with a little bit of kindness and say like, I could see why you would assume that, but this is actually the case, or deciding how much of your energy you want to give to people, that when the mob's actually coming for you, I think the best response is to like not reply at all, because it just feeds the flames. When people see that you're seeing their abuse, they keep going. And if you just like pause for a while, it can really calm things down.
This is for both of you. Have you guys changed your social media habits or how you respond to people over the last couple years?
I definitely, if I may, I think also just personally reporting on criminal justice reform stories has helped me become a better person overall. So I very much believe in accountability. Again, when you're harming people, like that's truly not okay. Or if you're just being like just a terrible, awful bigot, and it's clear that you haven't changed on those views, I feel like that's not okay. Yeah. But I do try to remember that the person that you were even 3 years ago, the person that I was 3 years ago, it's very different. And if someone has said something awful, it's unfortunate. But if they've taken accountability for it and they've very clearly shown that they've put in the work to absolve themselves of that awfulness, I think it's silly to keep on harping on it. So just to be a good internet user myself, whenever people, when they bring up old arrests or old tweets or something, and it's very clearly not representative of who the person is, I definitely don't engage in that. And sometimes I'll say, hey, this is not actually correct. And
yes,
because a lot of the people who engage in that behavior want forgiveness for other people, I also try to remind that if we're going to extend this principle to someone else, we have to do it for this person as well that we're talking about.
That's a good point. It's funny though, I think we both kind of heard that question in the same way. You might have thought, like most people might hear, like, have we changed our personal use, like the way that we tweet? But I actually think that it's more about how I relate to other people and allow the information that I'm taking in to affect how I feel about things or people. And almost every single time that I see someone trending or see someone being canceled, I want to be on their side for a minute. Like, if I want them to be like innocent until proven guilty. And I want to say like, wait a minute, let's make sure that we actually have all the facts here. And I think it is important when possible to get in the replies and say, this isn't right, or defend people who, when you do know that they didn't do anything wrong. But I think my personal social media use, I never thought that I was going to be someone who like edited what I say, because I just feel like as long as you're being honest and you're being kind, and you're not going, of course I fall short of that. Of course everybody's going to mess up, and you're going to say something that you're going to regret, and you're going to cringe years later and say like, why did I say that? Mm-hmm. And I think knowing that means that I treat other people better, because I know what that feels like when you see a screenshot of a tweet that's like 10 years old and you're like, oh, I hate that feeling for you. because I know what it feels like for me. And so I think we are getting to a space where people are more forgiving. I'm less forgiving for like, well, I also, and I'm sure you know this too, being at Reason and knowing how much videos can manipulate people too. I'm also skeptical of videos of people being filmed, but I changed my behavior in public. I always kind of operate as if I'm, what if I'm being filmed? What if someone's trying to provoke me or provoke a reaction from me when I'm out in public? I've not seen, people being filmed like if they're refusing to wear a mask or their constitutional right to shop at Walmart without a mask on or whatever. And you want to laugh at these people, but the video might have been edited. You don't know what happened before the video started, or you don't know what happened after the video ended, or what were the things that led to that. So even those like video moments of like the worst moment. I was just screaming in my car on the Beltway 30 minutes ago or an hour ago. If somebody had heard that and videoed it, or like they might have from like a passing car, it's been like, that girl's having a bad day. But the worst moments of your day, like having that captured, I think we still need to have forgiveness for that too, because who doesn't scream in their car on the Beltway every now and then? Or who doesn't just act a fool when they're being, we're all in quarantine and lockdown and we've just had so much stress put on us. I think we should have grace for that too. There are some things that you need to apologize for and be held accountable for. And there are obviously times when you like you said, need to be mindful of that. But apart from that, I think that we all just need to be more graceful to each other and more forgiving of each other's flaws.
Yeah, I think everyone is scared of being canceled eventually, just because we're all imperfect. We all have done bad things. Who knows what will ever be resurfaced that you don't even remember that you did in college or something like that, at a party where you had too much to drink. But I'm curious, if we take that piece away from it, how you guys think women in particular, because I know this is a gender neutral problem, how women might be stifling their speech or just not even engaging in the political, back and forth in the first place for fear of not being able to have the boldness in which yourselves can have a back and forth conversation to really talk about the issues with people that come at you very upset or angry.
For me, I train women every day on how to use social media and digital at the Heritage Foundation and AFF, and I'm trying to encourage our experts, and not just women, I train men as well. And I find, though, that the women are more reluctant to really put themselves out there. And I always tell them, like, focus on the policies. It's not about you. You're the vessel, you're the person, and yes, you should have some personality and you should let people see that you are authentic and that you are a genuine person, and don't be fake authentic, because people can smell that a mile away. But if you're really passionate about these ideas and these policies, that is what you should be confident in and where you should like dig some strength from. But I find that men don't have those hangups. They're just like, oh yeah, let me make a Twitter account. And like, is this picture okay? And they're like, I don't know. I don't really want to, how much should I tweet and what should I say? And I think we do need to have a little bit more, if not confidence in, it's not about us and just making it about the things that we're passionate about and remembering why we are here in the first place. Like, what is the reason that you're online? Is it because you care about education and you care about your children and your children's future, and so that's what's driving you? Or do you care about society and the ideas that you know that you're passionate about? That should be what gets you out of bed and gets you online and gets you excited to actually show up and gives you that courage, and not making it about yourself. And that can also protect you, because if you don't ever make it about yourself, when people attack you and you're something from your personal life, they look like jerks because you didn't put yourself out there personally. You've only ever stuck to the issue at hand. And if they want to dig through your trash, that makes them a jerk, not you.
Zuri, do you work, for any of the people that you interview with your work, do you speak with women that are scared to talk, to speak out on behalf of criminal justice reform for fear of any kind of retribution?
So, for the most part, not really, only because the retribution that they face is more systemic. So they're actually worried about, like, like law enforcement and all that. So I think that that's a little bit of a different conversation. But I will say, in my own personal professional circles, they're either very male centric or they have the appearance of being very male centric. So on the libertarian side, there's definitely a lot of male influence there, but a lot of us women will get together and remind each other that we're actually wonderful communicators. And they're, at least on that side of things, it's very analytical, it's very data and facts driven, but a lot of people don't absorb, like they don't care about the facts. They want to know how policies will actually affect human beings. And a lot of women tend to be able to reach that side of people far easier. So we get together and we remind each other that, hey, we're all great communicators by nature of who we are, So I think definitely what Lindsay said, I was very excited to hear it. You kind of have to push women sometimes, not all women, definitely generalization, but a lot of women, they're very timid, which I think in some ways is kind of good. They do self-censor a lot before they just jump headfirst into things. And I think it's helpful to think about what you say before you say it.
Yeah, you have to help men out a lot more than women out of scrapes. So
yes, yes, I agree.
Sometimes it is good.
Oh yeah, so it's definitely a good quality to have, but don't be so afraid that if you're passionate about something, you don't talk about it. So definitely, there's a confidence thing there, but if you are a very outspoken woman and you're afraid of being canceled, just remember that you have to have the confidence. You have to have the confidence to say what you need to say. And if you know that you're standing on principle, nothing in the world can tell you any differently. And I say that as someone who, when I started talking about criminal justice reform issues, it was not received very well. I actually lost a lot of professional contacts. I lost a lot of the people who used to watch my interviews. They called me a sellout, called me like a liberal, all these things. And I was just like, okay, these things don't hurt my feelings because this is a very important issue to me. And I'm not going to not talk about it because it makes you feel uncomfortable. So.
Oh, that is such a good point. Yeah, because when you see injustice and you call it out, like how can you not? If people attack you for that, that's on them. And so I do think that that's a different thing from cancel culture. People who are being canceled or mobs are coming after them. Sometimes I see the quality of the mob, and I don't think people should dig too deep into that. But if the mob is a bunch of terrible people, or if you're being, I have friends who were attacked by white supremacists all during 2016, and I was like, that means you're doing something right. You're being attacked by the right people because you're obviously upsetting the bad people in our society. And so that can be a sign that you're not going down the wrong path, but the right one.
Definitely. And I will say people definitely see the mobs in I actually blocked 2016 out of my life because yes, I also had a lot of white supremacists in my mentions all over my feed. But people were like, hey, these are obviously terrible people. So, I mean, obviously the internet bullying is not okay, but even when it feels like there's a whole mob against you, again, the quality of the mob, people note that. And if they're terrible people, then you're going to be okay.
Absolutely. While we're on this topic, let's speak I'd love you to speak directly to women that are in the public space. Let's say running for office in 2020, all the way up and down the ballot. What would you say to women? And I'm sure they've already been through the ringer and a lot of these incidents. But what would you say to them to keep them kind of going forward and to help kind of ground them in their, I wouldn't say social media strategy, but just how they engage in the issues that they're passionate about for the next 2 months?
So definitely double checking your own principles first, making sure you're not a hypocrite. Let me be the first to say that I did not always do this, and I would say all sorts of things that were just regurgitated talking points. And when I looked back at some of my comments and my posts. I really questioned what made me say all those things. So definitely making sure that you are principled and that you're arguing from or not even arguing, but that you're posting from a place of principle. That's important. Because it definitely becomes more difficult for people to call you out for being a hypocrite when you can clearly say, actually, here's what I said last week about the same issue, and it's the same. That, and then also not being a jerk. So definitely, again, in my own personal experience, I definitely see more men kind of having this issue of being like a jerk online, but I have seen some women say things and just to see the responses of, did you forget that you were talking about humans? Why would you post that online? So just remembering that before you make a joke at someone else's expense, especially someone who died recently, make sure that you are putting yourself in their shoes and their family shoes and thinking about how you'd want to see that information if someone was talking about a loved one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, ouch. That to me, I think when women already have so many obstacles before wanting to run for office, but I feel like we have even more against us now, particularly in this space, because we're worried about people digging through our trash because we all have things. You see news stories now where people are calling up the high school boyfriends and girlfriends of these candidates and like, I don't want that for me or my family. And it's not just about myself anymore, especially when you're talking about women who have children and children that are in high school and husbands whose careers they also have to worry about. People, when they get canceled, they don't just disappear. They still have to have a paycheck and be able to afford to take care of their children. Or, in some cases we have seen where spouses are fired because of the actions of their wives, or husbands, which I think is really terrible. But when it comes to running for public office, we need good people to step up. We need, like more than ever, I think we've seen that we have a lacking on all sides of the aisle. This is not conservative or liberal. This is truly, or libertarian. This is truly just, we need good people to step up. And no offense to men, but a lot of times, women are those people, but we never think of ourselves as we should run for office, or I could do that, because we're worried about people digging through our trash. And if we put ourselves out there and say, I'm really passionate about education, or I'm passionate about, criminal justice reform or civil asset forfeiture, or, whatever injustices that we see that we want to correct in our society, I think that is when you see those mobs come after people and say, well, you shouldn't be speaking about this issue because you did this. Or, my friend Elizabeth Patton, who got canceled years ago, people dug up like she had been arrested for shoplifting, and so she was calling out other people for similar behavior, and it was just a really ugly thing. And I just think that we need to be courageous and not be afraid of that. I think the best examples that I see are AOC and Elise Stefanik, which, no surprise, they're some of the youngest members of Congress. And I think it's because they turn those attacks into wins for themselves. And so they can actually say, especially if it's conservatives attacking AOC, she's like, come on, bring it, because that gives her a full news cycle of martyrdom where she can say, see, they're making fun of me for my beautiful face, or like, I danced in a video and aren't they ridiculous? And so I think being able to call out the people calling you out and using that as an opportunity to show that the mob is stupid and not you can be a good thing. So when people do come and attack you, being able to turn it around and be courageous and say, nope, I'm not allowing this. Go ahead and pull up my nudes from college or whatever you want to throw at me. That's sexism. You're not scaring me. I'm still going to be here. I still care so much about this issue that I'm not afraid of you. And I think when people see that you don't back down to the mob, and that you don't, you're not bent by that or intimidated by what are literally threats. I mean, that kind of behavior, when I see that, mobs trying to come for members of Congress or whoever, that's not about accountability. That's not about, if they're exposing corruption, misuse of funds or things like that, that's totally different. If they're just coming for you to attack you, I think you have a lot of opportunity to turn it around and say, nope, these are people that are just trying to get good people out of politics, and I'm not going to participate in that, or I'm not going to let them get away with it.
Yeah, I think there's, I'm looking at some questions we have from the audience, and this is actually a great transition to our first question. It's, do you respond on social media to every cancel comment or just not reply? And I think this really goes to the, who are people, like people that are trying to take political pot shots just to try to like make noise versus legitimate issues of, abuse of power. So how would you guys respond?
I say no.
Sorry. Go ahead.
My answer was short, so go ahead.
If I may say, I feel like it takes a little, like you have to learn internet culture, and it's okay to grab somebody and kind of ask them to school you on internet culture if you need that. But I've definitely learned when people ask, it's the way people ask questions. And I say this especially as a journalist. So if someone says, oh, well, could you tell me more about, like, I don't necessarily agree, I've always believed something different, but could you tell me more? That is a question you should engage with because they actually want to know, and you should answer that question with grace. But if someone responds to something you said by saying like, oh, well, do you always like, you can just kind of tell the tone, and you can ignore that because it doesn't matter what you say. They're just going to keep on being a jerk. So ignore the bad
trolls, because sometimes the trolls will pretend to be those good, genuine people that are in good faith. And then you do have to go look at their timeline and scroll a little bit. So I think quality over quantity, because sometimes you might think that you're engaging with someone in good faith and that they've asked you because they actually care, but really they're just trying to pin you down and move the goalposts. So I think yes and no. Just beware of concern trolls, because they can be a huge time suck too. And so like look for quality over quantity of engagement. Don't let it take a lot of your time. I think making sure that you put your phone away after a certain amount of time. Everybody's time is different, but I fail on that. So I'm giving you guys that advice that I myself don't follow.
That's so good. I will just add, so if you're on Twitter and you see somebody that has an egg profile picture, or you click on their profile and they have 5 followers, I think you're safe to completely ignore whatever comment just happened. That's a great point. Like if it's coming from a journalist who's asking a question, don't respond super defensively, because now you're just going to make yourself a story. And you're kind of doing exactly what they are hoping you will do, which is hype it up more. Do you guys have any other little tidbits on that?
Well, I just wanted to say, speaking as a journalist, not every commenter is a journalist, and you don't have to do follow-ups. There's no obligation. If you've answered something and you know that you answered it, you have no obligation to do a follow-up. Unless you're talking to me, then please. But
also use the mute function. I mean, you don't have to see, if you know that you have trolls, just mute them. And eventually when they see that you're not responding to them, they'll move on to another target.
Yep. Yes. We have another question. How can we educate ourselves and our social media followers on how to understand and not be drawn into the crazy side of cancel culture? Zuri, you want to take this?
Just on the personal level, remember that you don't have to talk to everyone on the internet. Again, there's no obligation. They can't make you talk to them. But then also conversely, just remember that you don't have to engage in every topic. Sometimes I see trending topics and I'm just like, out of curiosity, I'll see what's happening and then I'll move on because it doesn't need further comment and I don't need to be part of that.
Yes, I think that's what I was saying earlier about, didn't all of our moms say, like, mind your business? Let's bring that back. Can we bring back, or let's normalize saying, I don't know enough about that to comment. let me defer to these experts, or let me just not say anything. Like you don't, I think we need to normalize that more than ever, because we do see, separate from cancel culture, like a death of expertise. And so when you have people like Zuri who have spent years writing about criminal justice reform, who are probably way more familiar with like abusive prosecutors and their names and where this stuff happens and who these people are, and then you think that a 5-minute Google search empowers you or makes you just as experienced to like fight with her. I hate when I see that. I cringe on behalf of the people who act like they're suddenly legal scholars because they spend a couple minutes on Wikipedia and they think that they can spar. And I don't think, we don't have to. You don't have to do that, and you shouldn't do that. So if you want to stay away from the crazy cancel culture, it's not just an area of the internet, it's all over. But if you're trying to avoid that, I would say exactly what Zuri said. Don't feel like you have to engage in everything, but also feel free to call out other people in your circle, because it'll make it a better circle of friends. I think something that you do see happening more on Instagram now, especially in the past couple of months, is my silence is making people uncomfortable on certain issues. And so they'll say like, why haven't you weighed in on that? And my answer is because I don't want to feel compelled. I feel like it's very cheap to be told that I need to comment on something, or that me saying or making virtue signaling or whatever you want to call it is helping someone somehow, or that my silence is complicit or whatever. So I don't want to be compelled to talk. But then conversely, when I see people that are just kind of making themselves miserable and feeling like they have to post on every single issue, I will sometimes pull them aside and say like, look, I think you're making yourself really unhappy. Maybe you should step back and kind of not feel like you have to engage on every topic.
Candidates get sucked into the Twitter trap. They will go to their consultants, or maybe their consultants are coming to them and say, we need to talk about this, we need to answer this, we need to put out our position on this. And it, goes back to a huge menu on your website where you're literally listing out everything. It's not helpful because people are not following your campaign that closely. And oftentimes you put yourself in a box because now you haven't gone through the authentic conversation. You haven't identified maybe new points of thought within your own community and your constituents on some really nuanced issues. And so
sometimes I think if you are silent on things that matter and you are a candidate or you are a member and you don't say something about something, and then later you want to weigh in and get on the conversation when it impacts you personally, and you don't have a record of ever having commented on that issue until it affects you personally, that can make you look like a jerk too, because it's like, oh, now you care about this issue that we've been screaming about for months. So I think when things are trending, be it a terrorist attack or someone killed by police or something, do need to be very thoughtful in how you respond. But I think that you should find a way to engage. We shouldn't shy away from engaging on things. I think that's very different from acting like we're experts on the issue. I think that we can just reply with compassion and say, it's terrible what happened here, and I think we should fight for XYZ. But I don't think we have to act like we're experts on that. I think that's a little bit different. Sorry if I interrupted you.
No, it's fine. It will hurt you politically if it looks like you're staying conveniently quiet until polling results come out.
I want to add that it's okay to divert to experts. So even for like my own reporting, I don't know, just because I'm a reporter doesn't mean I know everything in politics. And there's actually a lot more that I don't know. Even in the criminal justice system, there are certain aspects of it that I just straight up don't touch. And I don't know about it. So when someone asks me a question, I always say, oh, well, I don't report on that, but you can follow my colleague at whatever. You can follow the nonprofit at whatever. And if someone tries to be like, oh, well, you just don't care enough about the issue, you can say, well, I do care about the issue. Here's what I've already said about something similar. But if you want more information, at that person, send them over to that Twitter account.
Absolutely.
That's a great way to also like counteract cancel culture, because it's like boosting culture. It's like the opposite of it when you're actually helping to like prop people up for doing good work. Great.
We have one other question, which is very relevant. Is it worse to delete a post than to keep it up?
That's a good one because, well, okay, so I was actually about to say that's one reason why you shouldn't delete your tweets when we're talking about having a good record. So obviously you want to establish a good professional and a record of your beliefs. I think nuking all of your tweets from the time you started your account, if you started it when you were like 15 years old and you said really stupid things and you were attacking people because you were not, things were so different then, or you were different because you were a child, nuke those tweets. Just nuke them. And if people got screenshots of them and you have to be held accountable for them later, you can say, I obviously deleted those tweets for a reason, or I nuked all of my tweets because I just wanted to start with a blank slate, just as I think everyone deserves to. And there are apps that are available. I think Jumbo is one of the latest ones that does a really good job of deleting older tweets. I like having a record that goes back to 2008, 2009. I don't know when I got on Twitter, actually, which is bad. But I like having a record of being able to show and demonstrate my evolution as a person and showing that I was at Obama's inauguration and that I was at, it's cool to look back at those moments and then be able to demonstrate not just growth, but that we don't all have fixed ideologies and that we're willing to like change and be good actors. So I think no to nuking all of your tweets unless you think that you just need that blank slate and that peace of mind. But if you get called out for a bad tweet, especially if you've tweeted something like now, like you tweeted something in reaction to a news story and you promoted misinformation, yes, you should not only delete that tweet, but you should contextualize it. I think the sad thing about that is, though, if you delete that tweet and it had 500,000 retweets, you can never put that genie back in the bottle. There's still going to be thousands of people, even after you delete that tweet, who still just believe that information that they've spread, because then when you tweet a correction, it'll get like 5 retweets. No one's coming to retweet your correction. They only wanted that salacious thing, and that's why they retweeted it. So that's the sad thing, and that's, once again, why we need to be so careful with the information that we share.
So, first of all, 100,000% everything that Lindsay just said. But the only thing I'd like to add is for corrections. This actually bothers me because as a journalist,
thing is probably way better than mine. So go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, as a journalist, like we have to be very upfront about our corrections. So there's no hiding a mistake. As embarrassing as the mistakes are, we put it in big, bold letters, correction, you know? So just what Lindsay said for when it comes time to actually correct a tweet, I personally hate when people kind of tweet something after the fact, hours later, and then don't really reference, quote tweet the wrong tweet, or go on that thread with the misinformation and say correction. Yeah, reply to it. Make it easy for people to find that information. Don't say, oh, well, I put out a tweet hours later, didn't really reference it, so it's fine. Like, really take accountability. And as embarrassing as that is, and as negative as some of the responses will be, a lot of normal people see that and they appreciate it.
Yeah. I would say my favorite way people correct misinformation on Twitter is to take a screenshot of the original misinformation, delete the original misinformation, and then put your correction with the original underneath of it. So you're holding yourself accountable. You stop the spread of the original misinformation by just quote tweeting it and leaving the original one there to pick up more steam.
I think one reason that people get so upset, though, about misinformation being like when you delete it too, and especially I'm sure you've seen this amongst journalists, is because people are just so mad about kind of like the confirmation bias, or like, why did you believe that in the first place? Why did you automatically just assume that that information was correct and you shared it because it confirmed your bias and you thought, I believe that. And then when all the facts were known, you had to admit that you were wrong. And so I think one really good practice just personally is to like fight your confirmation biases. If something's too good to be true or something just fits really neatly into your ideological framework, you should resist that, sharing that, and try to make sure that you have all the facts before you engage, because it makes you look less, not just rigorous, and people should trust you less over time, if you do that too often, and especially if you're not willing to admit that you were wrong. But even if you are willing to admit that you were wrong, you see Sean King do that all the time, where he'll just delete misinformation. And now I don't want to talk out of school, but I'm just saying his reputation has taken a really big hit. Whereas you see people like, there's other people on the internet who are willing, Seth Mandel, people who are willing to say, I accidentally did this, mea culpa, here's the truth. And they have good reputations because of it. So I think that it does have a lot of implications, not just in how you respond to that misinformation, but showing that you've learned from it and that you don't do it again.
Yeah. Here's a good one. No question. Let's see here. Are women held to a higher standard when it comes to this type of activity?
Oh, yes. Sorry, that's my answer.
Yes. And this is actually something that I wanted to say a little bit earlier. Just for like women on social media in general, there is a lot of sexism out there. And just sorry to get too feminist over here. But there's a lot of sexism out here, and it comes from men and women as well on the internet, which is very uncomfortable because, like, well, you're a woman, so you should know better. But there's especially a lot to do with looks, perceived sexuality that's not done in the way that the other person is approving of. So whenever I see things like that, just the truly nasty, egregious comments, so my favorite response is, would you say this to me if I were a man? And then I don't care what they say after that. I just leave it because chances are they wouldn't have said that if I were a man, and they're just being ridiculous and sexist, and they're not worth any more effort. So that's just something that I wanted to add earlier. I definitely, and then to also actually answer the question, I think women are held to a higher standard because people are sexist, and women can't make as many mistakes without someone going straight to looks or sexuality, which is so odd and weird and uncomfortable that that's what people choose. So,
yeah. And I think sexism is worse now, actually, in some ways than it was because of the internet, and than it was when my grandmothers and mother and other the experiences that they had, because they were able to build strong communities and relationships and people knew them. A lot of times when you're engaging with strangers, you do see that default of, why are women treated with so much more skepticism? I think the example that's burned in my brain, you guys probably saw this, was a microbiologist. A woman shared a study that she'd written, and then a man replied and kind of debunked it and said, like, well, read the piece. Here's what it said, And she replied simply to him, and I've seen this happen multiple times, I wrote that piece. Like, you're literally asking me to read a piece, or that I didn't read it correctly when I wrote it. And I think that, kind of, you see examples of that happening all the time, where we're kind of dismissed. Or I think that we're asked to apologize more than men are. I think men are allowed to slide on a lot of things, but we're always the one that have to humble ourselves and say, like, I'm sorry, and I shouldn't have lost my temper. And, I think that's wrong. I don't think, it depends on the situation. But if you get super animated about something and people think like, whoa, she needs to apologize for that, you don't see people saying that to men. And I do think that there is a different standard of behavior, personal behavior. Men can get all fired up and spout off and rant, and nobody looks the other way, but we get called Karens, or if we're passionate about something, or if we call out an injustice. Depends on the injustice. Obviously, you can actually be a Karen for calling out something that's dumb. But if you are just a person, like, I just think that there is a lot of a double standard still that we need to fight back against. And that's a great way to do it.
Yeah.
Would you do that to a dude? I don't think so.
We have one question. We have one question that I think is probably going to be really hard to answer, but it is, what are trusted sources to vet the facts so you can tell when something is a real cancel culture situation, or how do we even know what's true and false on the internet?
You probably know this better than I do.
Well, I was going to say, follow Reason Magazine, just putting a personal plug out there. But in all seriousness, just reading for yourself. If you see people talking about something, definitely don't react based on what they're saying. Try to find the original source. It also helps when people, this is very much cancel culture, but then also just like having a fact, like in general online discourse. If you haven't read the article yourself, if you haven't watched the video yourself, if you haven't done anything like that, make sure you do that first before you comment, which a lot of people don't do. And speaking especially as a journalist, please don't go off the headline either, because there might be more facts that you need to read first before you react. So definitely judging for yourself and then knowing what the actual information is. Like trust yourself to filter. Just find the information, but then also separately read Reason magazine, because we don't play first side, so we don't have any incentive to hide.
Plug the Daily Signal.
Yes. Go to dailysignal.com.
Well, yeah, and I think for me, you mentioned finding the original sources, because I think that there are a lot of media outlets. Reason's not one of them, but there are so many media outlets that do control what information gets through. So sometimes I always look for, if I am engaging in an argument and I want to make the case for something, and I know that I'm looking for sources that the people that might be skeptical of. So I'm not going to link to Daily Caller or Breitbart or, because I know that person's brain is going to just shut down and they're not going to believe those facts. I need to make sure that I find them on another outlet. So, if the same news story is being written, even if it's not written in like your vein, but if you're just looking for the facts, go to the source material all the way down, however you have to get there. If it's citing a government stat, or if it's finding the original video, and if there is control, within, a media outlets reporting it in a different way, or they've edited the video in some way, you do need to be accountable for that, so that when you present it, say, well, according to CNN, this is what they've reported. I don't know if this is true yet. They're still waiting for all the facts to come in, but this is what we know so far. And caveat what you're saying to show that you're still being skeptical, or that not all the facts are known yet, and that you're still, it's not a definite situation. I think that can also give you a lot of grace to be able to say, well, I didn't say, 100% that this was the facts. We were still waiting for information.
Yeah, I would just add that when people share links trying to convince me politically of something online, the first thing I look for is what source they've shared. Regardless of what you would consider mainstream news, fake news, whatever, I'm always going to be more willing to believe an argument if it comes from one of the alphabet networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, NPR, one of the wires. If you're sharing something that I know is a specific slant, whether it's Breitbart or Salon or, one of those types of places, I'm just going to be like, I'm not even going to click on the article now, because I don't care.
You feel manipulated. And people don't want to be manipulated. I think sometimes you can cite things and use a link just to cite your sources or a screenshot. There's so much that can be taken out of context, or you can strip things from context, which is why Twitter's not always the best medium or the best place. Facebook comments are not always the best place. Instagram is certainly not the best place, because you can't link to things in the comments. So you're just sitting there on your phone, frantically writing a novel to someone, and it actually makes you look very undignified. So a lot of times, if it can't be said in the comments, if you find yourself getting in that kind of back and forth debate, reassess whether it's a valuable use of your time, or that it's not your job to make the case for somebody. If someone says something and then you say, well, I don't think that that's true, it's not your job to be a researcher on behalf of someone to debunk the claim that they just made. And they will put you in that position in an argument and make you spin your tail and go prove your facts, when really they're the ones that need to prove that what they just said is true. So sometimes you can just always turn it around. You don't have to always be the one to provide a source. You should be able to reply and say, no, I would like you to provide me some sources, actually.
Absolutely. And I will just say, all of these networks I'm about to list do great independent reporting, but they just so happen to have a lot of controversy just from like people when they hear the name. So if you're sharing a Fox News link, if you're sharing a CNN link, if you're sharing an MSNBC link, just know that there's a lot of preconceived notions on what you're about to serve up on a platter for people. So try to find more neutral news sources if you want to actually have a bigger impact with the information you're sharing. So with that, I am going to just let you both give parting words of wisdom, any advice or warnings for women out there looking to get a little bit more vocal on the internet.
You want to go first?
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, again, don't be afraid to use your voice. Check your bias and make sure you're being principled, but also be fun. I find it very stuffy when people do like press releases on the internet, and also actually Lindsay is a better person to hear from because I feel like I get to have a little bit more room to be fun just because that's my brand. But obviously, if you're running for, like, you should be a serious person if you're running for office, but it's okay to make jokes that are funny. It's okay to use a GIF. It's okay to use a meme. Obviously, not a stupid one, but if there's something, like, it's okay to give yourself a little bit of room to be creative. And I know Justice Don Willett, his Twitter is so awesome. Yeah, all he does is tweet like memes and GIFs and talks about actual like rulings. And it's like, well, this is a judge. Shouldn't he be serious? But he's pretty funny and he has a great following that way. So if you know that you have it in you, it's okay to engage in that fun side of yourself as well.
Yeah, and you can diversify your content. Obviously, you should have some serious academic content and serious policy work, but I think showing that you're an authentic person and having a sense of humor is really important. But I think my only advice that I can give is if you're going to attack bad ideas, never people, and try as much as you can to stay away from never attack someone personally for any reason. And if you do fall short of that, and if you do, feel free to apologize, and just be a joyful and optimistic person online. I think that it can be difficult, but it's so refreshing in times like this when other people are kind of spreading fear and spreading doubt, and we live in kind of uncertain times. We've always lived in uncertain times. We've never really been guaranteed tomorrow. And so I think living with optimism and showing that you're an optimistic and joyful person can really make a huge difference in the way that you're perceived, and also in the ability for people to forgive you if you do mess up at some point. We all make mistakes. So I think showing a lot of grace to others is important too.
Absolutely. I will add that intentions matter. So give everybody the benefit of the doubt. Remember that there's a person behind the screen for everyone you're talking to. And just be nice, everybody.
I made a Russian bot joke in there that I think fell a little flat. Sometimes it's not a person, but usually it is, and act like they are.
Well, Lindsay, Zuri, thank you so much. Everybody, you should go follow these wonderful women. You can find Zuri Davis on Twitter at properlyzuri. And you can read her work at Reason Magazine. That's reason.com. And then you can follow Lindsay at Lindsay Feiffield. I don't know why I just said your name weird. And wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find her at The Lady Brains. That's one word, Lady Brains. But I hope everybody has a great hump day, and thank you for watching. Take care.
Guys, it was great talking to y'all.
Bye.
Bye.